Hey folks, Mick here with Blitz TCG. I have a few exciting updates to share with you today, so let's go ahead and dive right in. First off, I'm not going to rebuild the game from scratch or show you me clearing my registry or any of that other stuff we did in the first video. Just know that I have already done that for this video. I'll try to keep it a little shorter, a little more concise. I'm in my friends build right now on the screen, so we'll click into that. You'll see Unity load and we'll be brought to the main menu. Now I've made a few changes to the main menu at this point, or the login screen if you will. The first being that we now check for unique usernames. So you can see here Low-Key Nerd is already in use. Please choose a different username. So this is querying off the Firebase database. If you choose a username that is not taken, of course it then goes to the next check, which would be email in this case. And it'll also yell at you if you're using characters that are not approved for Firebase integration, because we're now storing these usernames in Firebase. Alright, so let's go ahead and sign in so I can show you a little bit about what's going on in the game itself at this point. This is just one of my throwaway accounts. Go ahead and hit log in. You'll see got a nice little fancy loading animation, some feedback from last time, even though this is pre-alpha, is that we should throw a few animations in there, so I went ahead and did that. So the big thing from last time that I've been working on is the friends list, and the friends list is a little more complex than I thought it would be, frankly. I'm not hugely adept with Firebase, but I have since become pretty adept with Firebase, necessary to do this. If we come down here, we see the friends button is no longer grayed out. We can click that, little loading symbol pops up, and that's because it's trying to query for the total number of friends you have. And you can see here it's returning 0 right now. So basically it queried Firebase and it returned no friends. Let's click add, and when we click add, of course, the screen comes up where we can look for friends. I just happen to know the only 2 other users that exist, but let's just go through a few different checks. So we can press enter. Of course, that's an invalid username. We can enter some random letters. That user doesn't exist. Now, something important to note here is that we're searching based off of the username. So that's why it became a little more challenging than I thought. And it's mainly because I had to tie the username to the user ID, which is randomly generated when a user creates their account. So anyways, we don't got to go into all that. But just me complaining a bit. So if I try to add myself, of course, it yells at you, you can't add yourself. That would be silly. Well, let's actually try to add a user that does exist. And we can see I added Mick Test, and of course, let's try High Key Nerd. We'll get 2 users there. And you can see when that user is added, the friends list reloads and that user pops up. If we try to add that user again, the message changes and it says, hey, High Key Nerd is already added. And again, that's because it's querying Firebase and returning the fact that that user is already added, so you can't add them again. If I close and reopen, you'll notice that it tries to requery, but because nothing's changed, of course, this view doesn't change. So now let's think through if we want to remove a friend. So if we want to remove a friend, similar process, we need to query the database, we need to make sure they exist, blah, 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 blah. If I search for blank, of course, it doesn't work. If I search for myself, of course, I can't remove myself. If I search for a random user, we know that that user doesn't exist, so it's not even worth our time to try. And then if I search for a user that is on my friends list and exists, then that user is removed from my friends list. So I can do that. Now let's say, for some reason, I press that button again. So this is a user that does exist, and they're not on my friends list. So in this case, like, the message is telling us, hey, Mick Test exists, but they're not on your friends list, so you can't remove them anyways. So with that being shown, I'll just add one back for the sake of demonstration. Oh, well, probably help if I didn't add myself. And you can see, things are working, spick and span. Maybe the one last thing I'll show is just logging out. So that was a proper log out. We'll log back in so that you can see that everything is sticking from Firebase. And one thing I'll show as well is, let's quickly bring open this. And we'll show a little bit about the Firebase side of things. So you can see here that High Key Nerd user has been added to this user's friends list. And the reason that this is blocked out up here is because that has some private information in it that, although this is the test system, I still don't want people having in their hands. All right, so let's go ahead Close that out actually. Let's remove this friend. Let's clear the friends list. We'll remove this friend. And then what I'd like to show you, now this little setup up here is just for demonstration purposes. So I can come into this little area and type in any number, press update, and it'll generate fake friends, right? So these aren't really fire-based friends, they're fake friends. But the reason I want to show you this is because we have the scroll bar working. So if you see a nice little scroll bar here, it fits with the UI and it is working as one might expect. So if I try to do, you know, 100, like 180, of course that still is working fine. So that UI basically is spick and span. If I go back down to 1, it looks like this. If I try to go over 200, so 201, this is just for demonstration purposes, really. It's saying, hey, you know, you can't have more than 200 friends. But if I close that and reopen it, it just requeries Firebase, so it brings me back down to 0 because I have 0 friends added on this account right now. All right, so that is pretty much the friends list in a nutshell. I'm moving pretty quick because I actually have a good amount to show you today as far as updates go. So for some of you, that'll be exciting. For some of you, not so much. So let's go to something else that might excite you. Now, if you're wondering why this is in 2 separate builds, it's basically because I'm working with a separate group of people, and I have not merged these projects yet. For the most part, things are the same between the 2 projects, but I've done a lot of coding on my side that we have yet to merge into their project. But for, you know, login and whatnot will still function. You just don't see the fancy loading animation, and the friends button is grayed out, so it's pretty clear that this is a different build environment. Anyways, what I'm very excited to show you, what very few people have seen, is actually the deck builder. So the deck builder has begun to be built and configured. It's a little buggy right now. I'm not going to try to pretend that it's not, but it's close. It's pretty close to being where I need it to be, I think, for at least an alpha use. So when you click deck builder, you're brought to your deck builder screen. And of course, there's no animations or anything like that now. It's very plain. And you're going to see some placeholders, but I still think it's in a good enough spot to show. So you have 5 pre-made decks that you can assemble. So these will be saved to your local machine. And then when you query for an online match, what we're going to do is check against the blockchain database, Ergo's database, to ensure you actually own the cards that you're trying to play with, or else you are being lent them through some lending process or some other cool things we might be able to do at some point. So anyways, right now it's just all local for the sake of testing, right? Everything's local. We'll click new deck here. Now once I've solidified the generals that I want to have for alpha, you'll have a fancier selection little window here, and you'll be able to see like Margot, Mios and Bass, or Nasetari, you know, whatever generals you want to use for this deck. Now the reason it makes you select a general is because you'll only be able to use certain cards with certain generals, right? So if you pick the red general, then you should only be able to use cards that are considered red cards or neutral cards. So your general is really going to matter a lot in Blitz. So anyways, let's just pick one of these dummy options for now. We'll click red, and we're brought to our deck builder. So the deck builder, I really want to keep it simple, pretty, right? Something that's accessible. It makes sense when you look at it. So on the right-hand side, pretty straightforward. These will be your available cards. So of course, your deck will always have a bunch of free cards in them that all users can use because it is going to be a free-to-play game. But this should also be querying the blockchain to bring in available cards that you have in your wallet. So these would be like your card tokens. So let's just pretend, right, that these are all blockchain cards, right? It's been queried, they've been loaded into Unity, cool, or Blitz, the Blitz environment, cool. Then I can click that card, and you see the list comes down and drag it into the current deck. So I think this is pretty neat. I just like the ability to drag and drop. It feels more like I'm building a deck and less like some digital game. One of the other things you can do is actually click it to preview it, and of course there'll probably be fancier animations and whatnot eventually for this sort of stuff, but it's truly just to show you that some of this stuff is possible, and it looks pretty cool when it's working as expected, right? So, well, I could go back and click add there, and now let's just add a bunch more cards to this. So you might be saying, well, how do I know what cards are eligible to be used in this deck? I don't really want people to have to think about that, so those cards are actually going to sort to the bottom and turn gray. So they're a little hard to tell difference of right now, but you'll see that these cards down here are actually just a shade darker than the ones above it. So basically you can't interact with those cards because they can't be used in the deck. So that's the deck builder in a nutshell. Now if I want to remove cards, I could drag in here, and you see that the cards are removed. I could also click remove, and that removes them from the current deck. Once I'm satisfied, and you'll have to put some, you know, there has to be some limit on the minimum number of cards and also some limit on the maximum number of cards. So I don't know what actually it's set to right now, but we'll just add a few in here so we can make sure we hit the threshold. So if I click save deck, that deck is now saved to this account, and I can access this as I choose. So then, you know, if I go back in the deck builder and I click this deck, you can see here that this red symbol appears, and of course this is indicated for the fact that I chose the red general. If I click edit deck, I am then brought back to the deck builder for me to be able to, of course, edit that content and those cards. You can also do a bit of searching in here. So if I come in and I say card, you know, all right, we'll skip over that. I had to bring a few cards back in here so I could, a few active cards, so I could show you the search functionality. So if I have a few active cards in here and I do a quick search, the search functionality is actually close to working at this point. So you can see that I search for card 11, I get card 11. If I just search for 11, I still get card 11. There are a few tweaks to be made to this, but, you know, again, getting pretty close to where we want it. For some reason you didn't want this deck at all, you could click delete deck. It probably will put a failsafe on that so you don't just close it out in a single button at some point. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So, you know, you could go back in, build a new deck, and do what you do in this area as you see fit. And that's really where the deck builder is at for now. So next steps with the game, from my side, I'm going to be potentially implementing a chat system. I have to see how Firebase handles that sort of communication. And then once you're able to build a deck, we'll of course have the cards and sort of templated out, and they'll be able to be selected and used. So then we can start assigning some abilities to those cards that then interact with the game environment itself. So of course that's where Skirmish can then start being configured. So Skirmish will be basically where you do your alpha play testing and whatnot. Cool. So let's exit out of that, and I actually have one more thing to show everybody today, and that is that we have done and started design for a proper website. So this isn't just some Wix placeholder, and of course these are all just random letters and words, and some of it's working at this point, like the little image scroll. But this is going to give you an idea of what the actual Blitz TCG website will look like. It's sort of a mix between Gwen's website, Gods Unchained's website, and a few other websites that I like. You see down here we have our socials, and those buttons actually do work. Overall, it's coming together nicely, so it's got a bit of scaling to it already. A few bugs to iron out, and the mobile view is actually working as expected too. So, although it is certainly still underway and there's a lot to do, this at least gives you an idea of something to expect in the near future. And so with that, I think I can wrap this dev update up. I'm sure it's already well longer than I wanted it to be. Appreciate all of your time, and I look forward to seeing you on our next one. See you, folks.